really wicked and strange stuff was going on. I think we're getting ready to see it again in an unfathomable application to contemporary events.
Do you believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that giants were the offspring of extraterrestrials who came to this planet?
If you mean by extraterrestrials, I believe that angels were, and I believe in literal biblical angels, that basically had their own realm of being. In Greek, there's a word called oikaterion, which means, in essence, their place, their dwelling place, or their, if you will, boundaries. I believe they left the boundaries that God had given to them, and that they basically mixed with the seed of women, producing this offspring. And I think that it's going to happen again, because what's happening is in Noah's day, the whole earth was filled with violence. And let's face it, this isn't a land of peace and love. I'm not only saying this land, but things are not getting, in my opinion, more sedate or more mellow. They're building towards a climax. So to answer your question, I believe that what is commonly called the aliens, or as Zechariah Sitchin writes about the Anunnaki, are definitely fallen angels. So they would be extraterrestrials, but they would almost be extra-dimensionals.
Aren't fallen angels, Stephen, like the devil?
Well, the devil was actually a cherub, and there are different groups of heavenly beings. Let me give you a good example. One of the most interesting, if you will, windows into the past is the book of Enoch. Enoch was a guy that, in Genesis, very little is said about him, that he walked with God and was not, for God took him. Two guys that didn't die were Elijah and Enoch. The point being is Enoch wrote or is attributed to writing the book of Enoch, but there were also other volumes that have disappeared. There are people like myself that believe the Vatican has them and won't release them, okay? And it's interesting that you have in the book of Enoch a whole a panorama of not only the past but also the future. And the future in the book of Enoch is one that's pretty gruesome until God ultimately puts down evil. So I believe there is a battle between good and evil, and I believe that people should realize that if I want to keep you in the matrix, I'm going to provide you all the data and all the imagery that will support the matrix. Once you get outside of the data and imagery beyond the matrix, you find out, hey, somebody's been lying to me. And that's why I wrote this book. And again, it's 480 pages, George, 30 years of stuff. And people may not accept everything, but if they want to be blown away by what really went on in history, I would encourage them to do that. And by the way, on my website, there's a chart. I don't know if you've gone to it, but go to my website, stevequayle.com, and then look on the chart, and you'll see how tall 36-foot guys are in proportion to 6-foot guys.
Yeah, I saw that. Well,
and what's interesting, now obviously their arms would be bigger, their heads would be bigger and anything. That's just for relative size. And if you think about it again, you've got guys who are writing, from the Middle East. And have you noticed this week, too, that it seems like, well, actually in the last couple weeks, more flying saucers, more...
Oh, it's huge. They're all over the place for some reason.
They're all over the place. And so I maintain that obviously there's going to be, if you will, a dialectic setup where, the, quote, space brethren are here to save us from ourselves, kind of like the day the Earth stood still.
Yes.
And the point being is that there's a very sinister side to this. And the very sinister side to this is the fact that humanity is expendable, and it's kind of like, do you remember seeing an old Twilight Zone where an alien comes with supposedly the book to save everybody?
It's called To Serve Man. That's the name of the Twilight Zone.
Being lunch.
My very favorite Twilight Zone episode. You brought it up.
And basically, what I'm saying is that we're seeing the same thing being enforced. By the way, again, it seems like, unfortunately, this is something that's coming back on the scene. And let me make a distinction, because I think this is important, and maybe we have to get to it in the second half of the show, but there is a distinction between a demon and a fallen angel, okay? A demon is a disembodied spirit. The giants, when they died, that which was born of heaven and earth, those spirits were what became the demons. They have appetites, and they all have one thing in common. You know what it is? They hate mankind.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So, this is fascinating stuff. And someone says, well, how does this fit into 20th century technology? The technology of the ancients so surpasses what we have now. The point is that we're all technologically egotistical and think, oh, boy, we got this, we got that. We don't even hold a candle to some of the things that have gone before us, because in the book of Enoch, it talks about the supernatural intelligence of the fallen angels being given over to mankind to basically, enable us to kill all ourselves off.
More on giants. I'm George Norrie. Back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast. Stephen, if there happened to be a battle between the giants and those of us who are of regular size, would the giants wipe us out?
No, I don't think so, and I think that day is coming, because when you look at just a lot of the situation that we hear references to with the, if you will, the abductions with aliens, and we know that some of their ships go down, and interestingly enough, George, we would win, but we will pay a price for that. And I kind of am fascinated by the, if you will, the attack in Kathmandu, where people are actually being zapped by whatever flying, vehicle is getting them. You're probably aware of that, but 3 people have been basically, killed, murdered, zapped, and that's the first time I've actually heard. Maybe you have heard differently, but that's the first time I've heard of a ship actually opening up and firing on people.
Well, I haven't heard about it. You're right. Now, on the cover of your book, Genesis 6, the 2 giants seem to be pretty friendly.
Well, these guys are Kashmiri giants, and this was taken in the late 1800s, 1895, I believe. And it's kind of fascinating because when you're dealing with the whole area around the Himalayas, obviously Kashmir is in the vicinity. The very word Nepal, it comes from to fall. The locals call the Himalayas, or Himalayas, some people pronounce it, the mountain of the gods. That's where Hitler sent specific, I guess you'd say, cadres of the SS looking for some of the giant tombs. Some of the Buddhist monasteries supposedly had some golden sarcophaguses with guys that were somewhere around 18 feet tall. You see that again in Raiders of the Lost Ark. When Steven Spielberg made that movie, he did do his homework and look into that. So it was interesting because most people don't understand this, that because of Hitler's occult involvement, the SS, which was, a secret organization with a lot of mystical dabblings. They went all over the world. They were looking for the Grail. They were looking for the Ark of the Covenant. They were looking for the Spear of Longinus, the spear that pierced Jesus' side on the cross. So fascinating stuff that they were looking for. Then if you understand the history of UFOs, when they really came to the forefront was right after World War II, or during World War II, the closing years of World War II. Then one of the most fascinating things was Admiral Byrd and Antarctica. All of the German U-boats had disappeared. We actually had a war in Antarctica. Most people didn't even know it existed. It was called Operation High Jump. You familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, fascinating. Listen, George, there is so much incredible stuff out there.
What happened there?
Well, during World War II, at the close of the war, when obviously to a lot of the Nazi high command, they saw that they were going to lose the war, they headed down. Headed down. They actually took many of their U-boats down to Argentina, and then they went to Tierra del Fuego, which is on the coast of South America, and then they went into Antarctica. Supposedly, Antarctica was called, by the way, New Schwabenland, and because of the volcanic activity, there were actual, if you will, almost, and this is something that is fascinating beyond belief, but the bottom line is there were so many U-boats that disappeared that they were actually setting up, if you will, an under-ice city, if you will, last-ditch place that was so temperate that the reports that got back to the South Americans and got all over the world were that basically the Nazis had set up a base in Antarctica that was temperate. In other words, even in some areas it was tropical.
Underwater? Underwater?
Pardon?
This was underwater?
This was under the ice. Under the ice. And this, if someone wants to go on the internet and look this up, it's Operation High Jump, or you can go to Cyberspace Orbit and type it into their search engine. It's one of the most fascinating, overlooked stories of World War II. Interestingly enough, too, Byrd talked about encountering flying saucers, etc.
Well, there's no doubt about that, and I've seen accounts on that.
Right. So what I'm saying is you're asking me a question. I believe we're coming to that time where there will be another battle. Let me give you a good example, okay, how the ancient will reflect the future. In the ancient Greek mythology, there was the offspring of the chimera were the harpies. You've probably seen some of the, Hollywood movies where they have these, like, huge creatures with bird-like bodies and the heads of women. The Norse legend, the equivalent, were the Valkyries, okay? Obviously, Wagner's Charge of the Valkyries, very famous piece of music. But in Revelation 9, 8, and 9, it says the Great Tribulation period, and it is talking about this, and they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions, and they had breastplates, as it were, breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. And this is talking about the battle that's yet in the future. So it's fascinating, isn't it? We look back to ancient history to look forward to the coming period of Great Tribulation. And I think Malachi Martin, and I want to bring him up again because that made such an impression on my life listening to him, putting two and two together. I think that he had access to so much stuff that everyone else is denied, okay? And given the access to what most people can only get snippets of or little pieces of, I think it absolutely took his breath away, and I think there's no way to describe it in human terms. And see, a lot of people get freaked out, and I'm sorry for that, but there is an aspect of history that's very non-chemically deterministic, that's very, very much going to change the way the world sees itself. Let's take, for instance, crop circles, okay? Have you ever
I wonder what happened to all of Malachi Martin's files and things like that.
Well, I got news for you. I believe that he was wasted, and whoever wasted him took him. And when I say wasted, I don't believe that he just died a natural death.
No.
And again, I guess, whether people want to believe that or not, I could say this. There were points in Art's interview with him where he was very scared.
Yeah, I heard some of that in his voice.
Yeah, and I'm not making it up, am I? You heard it too.
I heard it in his voice. You could hear things like that. A concern. Maybe not just scared, but a concern.
Right. Kind of like a desire, George, to really tell what he knew, but he knew he couldn't. And, it's interesting because if people have a hard time just grasping what I would call in-your-face history, how can they grasp stuff that's beyond their ability to even bring it into the containment of their brain?
All right, now what were you saying, though, about crop circles and giants?
Well, yeah, now we get into some interesting stuff because, again, when you're dealing with crop circles, and I think, Colin says that there's probably he figures 25 to 30% are real, and then there's a whole bunch of people out there trying to fake. What's interesting about the crop circles, and I'll tell you a fascinating story, the crop circles are a language unto themselves, and they're a basic, some of them are spatial references to different coordinates in the universe, okay? Now, in the Bible, the word stars can be substituted for angels, okay? 7 stars, which are the 7 angels.
All right.
And it's fascinating that the crop circles, what I began to do a couple years ago is to match up in a lot of the ancient writings. The angels have, like your signature and my signature, they have more like symbols. They're not hieroglyphics, but it's fascinating that there's basically a vocabulary, and there's a whole story that's being told. Let's say, for instance, you're in you're in Paris, and and you wouldn't do this, but you write your name on a place, okay? And you said, "This is George Norrie from Kansas City, Kansas." Okay.
Me doing graffiti?
It's not only graffiti, but it's a time-sensitive graffiti. When I say that, it's almost like, have you noticed that the circles now are appearing in British Columbia and different parts of the world?
Oh, they're almost in every country on this planet except for one or two.
But have you noticed that they're coming out in the open or manifesting themselves almost in direct relationship to the increase in saucer activity?
True.
Well, what I'm trying to tell you is, and I got to tell you that this stuff gets into really heavy beyond what most people can grasp. The National Security Agency has a prime directive. That prime directive is simply anything that will upset the status quo is automatically classified, top secret, above top secret, and then in the compartmentalization of it. We've seen it recently in the announcement that if they do find a near-Earth orbiting object, the astronomers have to give so much notice, and they're not going to be able to tell the people